Yeah, thank you, Dwayne, for asking me. And I'm grateful to be here. I'm sober today by the grace of God, by a 12-step program as outlined in the first 164 pages of the book Alcoholics Anonymous and Good Sponsorship. I tell you that because if I say anything else, I want you to know that the truth is those are the 3 reasons I got here and get to stay here. And I have a sobriety date. It's December 12th of 2000. I have a home group, which is the Tuesday night Kettering meeting. And I have a sponsor. Her name is Quincy W., and she lives in Los Angeles, California. 3 things I was told to get and keep when I got here. If you're new, I suggest you get and keep those 3 things. I protect those 3 things with my life. And I love Cocaine Anonymous. I love this meeting. I love you guys. It always feels weird to talk in a place like this because I know pretty much every face in this room. It's better when I'm somewhere else and I'm looking at and I don't know people. Because you guys see my uglies every day. You know, I can go, we went to the women's conference on Saturday, and at the last minute, their speaker was late, and they asked me to speak. And I go there, and I can portray myself as this amazing spiritual beacon of light, because they don't see me every day. And you guys, you get me in a WhatsApp group, which is never good for principles. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now. What I was like was selfish and self-centered. What I was like was I had something before I knew I had something, before I ever took a drink or a drug. I believe that I have an illness that is a mental illness that comes from within, and I treat it with drugs and alcohol. And I was 12 years old, and I had attempted to kill myself because, you know, at 12, life is really hard. And I discovered something simple, just smoking pot, you know, and it did something for me. I believe that drugs and alcohol saved my life for a long time. You know, I love to attempt suicide. Luckily, I've never been successful. However, I'm really good at attempting because life is really just too hard. And at 12 years old, I felt life was too hard, and I attempted suicide, and then I discovered pot, and everything was all right. And I think at about 17 years old, I knew I drank and did drugs differently than my friends. My friends all had an off switch. You know, I always meet those people. Those people are like, no, I've had enough. I can't, I'm driving. I've got to work in the morning. You meet those people, it's just the stupidest thing you've ever heard, right? And at 17 years old, you know, I didn't have an off switch. I dropped out of school. I never finished high school because I was busy. I got stuff to do, and going to school gets in the way. And at 21 years old, I had the outside manifestation of a drug addiction. In those days, we were snorting a lot of cocaine. It was not as cool to smoke it. It was free-based back then, and it was kind of low rent. And I had the outside manifestations of a drug addiction. My life was completely unmanageable. And I'd had my nose cauterized a bunch of times, and my gums were worn away, and I couldn't hold a job, and I attempted suicide. I took 64 sleeping pills, 10 cold tablets, and I drank it down with a bottle of Kahlua, and I put on a long white gown to die, because I'm such a drama queen. Like, you'll feel so bad when you find me. Oh. And fortunately or unfortunately, I'm a drunk dialer, and I called my mother, and my mother's a therapist, and my mother put me in a lockdown psych ward on what was at the time called a 72-hour hold, and I ended up there for 3 months. And I told them that I had trouble getting out of bed and I had trouble functioning. I did not tell them about the drugs. I figured that was not something they needed to know. They sent me to a meeting of another fellowship, and from what I remember, it was a bunch of toothless old guys, probably about the age I am now. And they were sitting around and they were talking about how they had lost their family due to drinking, and they had lost their job due to drinking, and they had lost their kids due to drinking. And I was 21 years old. I hadn't lost anything yet. And I knew I didn't have their problem. And I left that meeting, and I knew I couldn't do drugs anymore. Drugs are the problem. Drugs are bad. You know, in America, we had this big thing in the 80s. We had Ronald Reagan was our president, and Nancy Reagan, who was his wife, we had the Just Say No campaign. Just say no. That work for you guys? Because it didn't work for me at all. You're like, no, well, maybe just a little. And, but I knew when I got out of that psych ward, if I could just not do drugs, everything was going to be fine. In the psych ward, they gave me medication. I do love medication. I love medication that says, don't drink with this medication, because you know it's going to be good. And anything with a warning label, pretty much. And I had no clue the illness I was treating, and I got out. And I love alcohol and pharmaceuticals. If we had to, I don't believe there's a drug of choice. I believe if you put anything in front of me on a desert island, then I'm going to take whatever you got, and I don't care what it is. But in the perfect world, alcohol and pharmaceuticals for me are fabulous because I love a consistent effect. And I find that when I do crystal meth or smoke weed or crack or whatever that is, it's not always 100% consistent. But I love, the pharmacist gives me that big bottle of opiates, and I love some tequila to wash it down. By the way, if you ever wonder if you're an alcoholic and an addict, talk to the non-alcoholic people for a while, the non-addict people, because they really, the look they give you. I had a boss a few years back. She was a young gal. She was so cute. And she had some surgery, and I went in to see how she was doing, and she said, yeah, there's the, they gave me the pain pills, but I don't like them. And I said, you should try them with tequila. It's much better that way. And she looked at me and she said, that's dangerous. I'm not going to lie to you, it had never occurred to me that that was dangerous in any way, shape, or form, But I got out of that psych ward, and I knew that street drugs were my problem. I'm just not going to do drugs anymore. I really had this belief, I swear to God, by the time I got to you guys, I believed what made you a drug addict was needles. And so I'd smoke it, snort it, stick it up my butt to get high. But there was no needles, because needles made you a drug addict. And that carried on for a bunch of years. The last year of my drinking, I was hospitalized 4 times. For alcoholic comas, because that's the way I like to drink. I was powerless. And if you wonder what powerless looks like, my son, when I got sober, my son was 6. My stepdaughter was 13. And when I would leave the house to go out to drink, and a couple years before, and I'd leave the 12-year-old with the 4-year-old, because that's the best babysitter you got, doesn't cost anything. And my 12-year-old and my 4-year-old would stand there and go, please don't leave, please don't leave. And it's not that I don't love my children, but I have to go. And I have to leave them standing there. And in those days we had pagers. It's been a while. We had pagers, and my stepdaughter would page me, and I'd run out to the payphone because I was a good mother. And I'd call home, and I'd be like, what's wrong? And she'd be like, well, the cat's dead because the cat was just sleeping under the bed or something. And I'm like, the cat's fine, and I hang up the phone. And I go back to the bar. That's the best parenting skills I've got, And the last year of my drinking, I lost 3 jobs. Things got ugly on the outside. My parents had disowned me in an email because they were techno-savvy. And they said, we're not going to watch you die, and we're not going to watch you take our grandson with you, because they could see. I find it no coincidence that my mother discovered Al-Anon 3 months before I got sober, because she was done. She was way done. And I was marrying my second husband. We got married in our apartment because he was on house arrest. And I had met him in a bar, in a blackout. He was my dream man. I knew he was my dream man because he was wearing his work uniform and had a patch with his name on it, so I could remember his name throughout my whole blackout. Oh, it was beautiful. So romantic. He had a crystal meth problem, so he was sicker than me, and I was going to fix him. And we were going to be great. And, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous says the alcoholic life becomes the only normal one. And what I can tell you is I was raised with decent people in a decent home. I was raised with morals and values. And that last year of my drinking, we had moved into the apartment building with my husband's drug dealer and across the street from my favorite bar because I couldn't drink and drive anymore. And you know, when my husband ended up going to jail, at the end of that, I thought it was appropriate parenting. I would take my son, who was 6 years old at the time, and we would get loaded. I would get loaded in the valley and drive over to LA where he was in jail. And I'd park the car around the corner from the jail because I can't afford the parking. And I'm hoping they're not going to boot my car while I'm gone. And I get in line at the jail, and what the jail's like in Los Angeles is the cholas and the black girls, they're all tough, and not everybody gets in, so they kick your ass for your place in line. And so I'm holding my kid with one hand, and I'm fighting these women off with another hand so that we can go see my man. You know, and we get into the jail, and it smells horrendous because not everybody has the same level of bathing. And I've been there for hours. And, you know, he comes to the glass finally, and we've got the phone in the glass, and it's like, and then the phone's broken. And so we're mouthing through the glass, "I love you, baby, I love you too." And then I get back to my car and hope that there's no boot on it so that I can get back to the valley because I haven't been loaded in a long time, and I got to go home. And that's what it looked like. The alcoholic life became the only normal one. And I would love to tell you that I wanted to get sober. I would love to tell you that there was some great intention. There was absolutely none. I lost my third job that year. I still had health insurance in America. They had put a sticker on my door, and the chain was coming next because I couldn't pay the bills. They were taking my son away. I got backed into a corner, and I went to a treatment center. I did not go to a treatment center to get sober. I actually thought, honestly, if I could just come here and you guys would teach me how to drink and use drugs like normal people, it would be really awesome. My brother is one of those people. My brother's the kind of guy who drinks half a beer, puts it down, forgets where he left it. He irritates the living heck out of me. And I thought, if you could just teach me to be like my brother, everything's going to be cool. And that's what I came for. Unfortunately, I was the girl who took all her drugs to treatment. I wasn't really clear on the whole thing. I knew you weren't going to let me drink. And the guy who unpacked my bag at the treatment center pulled out my pop seal bag with 15 prescriptions in it. And he was like, "Oh, what's this?" I said, "Those are my medications. They're prescribed by a doctor." And he said, "You have a lot of doctors." And I said, "I have a lot of ailments." And he said, "Some of them are in Puerto Rico." And this guy was great because I think he knew I was ready to run out the front door. And he said, "Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take them up front. And when you need them, you can come get them." And I thought, perfect. It's beautiful. And that night they brought in a fellowship meeting. And you guys scared me to death. I don't know how to deal with you. You're all happy, shiny, smiling. That really bothers me. You're all smiling. You want to hug me, touch me. And I went up to the nurse's room and knocked on the door. The woman opened the door. Nice guy who unpacked my bags, nowhere to be found. Woman says, "What?" And I said, "I need 2 Ativan, 2 Xanax, a Valium, a Vicodin, a Trazodone, a Wellbutrin, and a Prozac, please. I'm having an anxiety attack." And she said, "You can't have that here." Right? Because that's the, you know, I said, "You don't understand." And that's the cry of the alcoholic and the addict, right? Is you don't understand. And she said, "Yes, I do. The worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to hyperventilate, you're going to pass out on the floor, you're going to wake up, and you're going to be fine." Slapping the door in my face. And that's exactly what happened. And I spent my first week in treatment sitting in meetings like this behind a sliding glass nurse's window. Because when I'm hyperventilating and passing out in your meetings, it's just really disruptive. And then my second week in treatment, I had to sit in a chair by the door with my foot touching the outside wall so I could sit through a meeting. And that was what I brought. You know, I was going to do some of what you did when I got here. I wasn't going to do all of what you did when I got here. I did like meetings. Where I come from, meetings are like, 300 people, very social, lots of cute boys. They had my 3 favorite C's: cookies, coffee, convicts. I love me some meetings. They told me to work the steps. I don't like anything with the word work in it. I don't want to work out at the gym. I don't want to work at a job, and I'm definitely not working your steps. They told me I'd get a sponsor. I got a sponsor in name only because every time I would talk to that woman, she'd tell me what to do, and I'm really crappy with authority figures. They told me to take commitments. I would only take a commitment where I got to look cute. In America, you'd get up in the front and I would be your literature chick, or your chick. And I'd wear a really short skirt and a really tight top because I was a lot younger then. And I had to be the center of attention. But I sure wasn't setting up your chairs and picking up your cigarette butts. And I hung out. They told me not to get in a relationship my first year. I didn't. I slept my way through this fellowship and 2 other fellowships trying to get recovery by injection. It didn't work. And I got my first sober relationship at 1 year and a day. Woo! Follow the rules. We were in love. We were going to meetings. He had been out of jail for 8 days. I'd worked step none. I am no God. I have no sponsor. But we're just going to go to meeting. We're going to be sober together forever. And in 9 months, he was loaded in my house. All our money was gone, and he was walking out my front door. And for me, this caused a serious problem because I have alcoholism and addiction. What I have at this point is 1 year and 9 months of completely untreated alcoholism and addiction. And my alcoholism and addiction demands treatment. It demands treatment with alcohol and drugs or a spiritual solution as outlined in our book. So it was 8 days before my second sober anniversary. That's 2 years without a drink or a drug. Standing in my shower crying. I couldn't stop crying. I had a plan. I was going to buy a gun so I could blow my head off on my second sober anniversary. Because like I said, I'm a drama queen. And I can't stand 1 more minute of this. You know, I came to you and I thought if I could just stop drinking and using drugs, everything's going to be fine. Unfortunately, what I have is alcoholism. So when I stop drinking and using drugs, everything gets worse. And luckily, I had trained my feet. I hadn't trained my brain yet. My feet took me out of that shower and took me to a meeting where some wonderful women grabbed me. Women who cared more about my life than my feelings. The women I know hear that all the time from me. Care more about my life than my feelings. If you're new, I hope someone cares more about your life than your feelings. And they said, you do some of what we do here. You don't do all of what we do here, and you're dying of alcoholism and addiction. And on that day, I was desperate and willing. And if you're new, I wish you desperation and willingness, because if you're not going to do the things we do to stay here. I guarantee. From that day to this, I started doing everything different, everything they asked me to do. Everything. I set up your chairs. I picked up your cigarette butts. I worked your damn steps. I did everything you asked me to do. And my life started to change. I'm a stuff seeker, so if you put stuff in front of me, I'll chase it. And what happened was I would go to meetings, these big speaker meetings in LA, and people would talk about how they got a car because they were sober, and they got a job because they were sober, and they got their husband because they were sober, their wife because they were sober. And I was like, yeah, I will chase that carrot. I want that. I'm sure they were talking about a spiritual solution, but I wasn't having any of that because God scared me and I didn't want your God. So I was going to neatly evade that. And I did everything else. I got really active. I became a real big service junkie. And I got really busy. And it looked so good on the outside. I'm telling you, it was so fantastic. I met my husband in the meetings, and we got married, and I had a BMW, and a really pretty house, and I was sponsoring Half the Valley. And I would sit in meetings, and was there something you had that I didn't have, and I didn't know what it was? Because my first drug of choice is what you think of me. And so now I'm 8.5 years, and I'm dying of this illness in these rooms, and I can't tell you I'm putting on the face in every meeting. Every meeting, because I want to sound good. I want you to like me. I want you to think I have it. And I don't. And I didn't understand that it was a program of principles. And I wasn't practicing any principles in any of my affairs at that point. And at 8.5 years, I started to think, you're really not doing all this stuff. I mean, are you really rigorously honest? And it started out with something really simple, like illegally downloading music and movies, because I think I'm entitled. And then I thought it was okay to cheat on my taxes. And then I thought it was okay to cheat on my husband. And I was doing shady stuff in and out of these rooms. And at 10 years, I'm walking towards a drink. And the woman who is my current sponsor came into my life, and she told me I was going to drink. And I said, don't you know who I think I am? And she said, you're the prom queen of the leper colony. Now what? You're popular in the fellowship. Woohoo! She opened up the book where it said that if my motives didn't change, I was sure to drink. And I didn't believe her until I was standing in a bar in Las Vegas, Nevada. And I had a thought, and that thought was, if I weren't an alcoholic and an addict, I wouldn't have to live up to these stupid principles. And I knew I was going to take a drink. And I called that woman, and I told her I was willing to do anything she asked me to do to not pick up. And she said, you're having a problem with principles, the first one being honesty, the second one being humility. And I found that when I got honest, humility took care of itself. Because when people in the fellowship found out that I had cheated on the nicest guy in the fellowship, people in my own home group were mean to me. They'd walk up to me at meetings, go, pfft, and walk away from me, which was great, because you couldn't be my higher power for one more day. See, when I got here, they said, make the room your higher power, and that's great, but you're going to fail me eventually. You're going to get pissed off at me. I'm going to do something wrong. Don't put me on a pedestal. I'll fall off, right? And I can't put you on a pedestal because you'll fall off. I had to get a God, and I had to get a God quickly. It says in our literature, God could and would if he were sought. I'm not a seeker. Again, an action word. I don't like to do any work. I like to sit in meetings and think, God is going to come to me. I'm special. Come. No. If you had asked me, I would have told you I was working the steps. If you had asked me about step 11, I would have told you, ooh, I'm not really good at meditation. I can't sit still. I don't like it. It doesn't matter. If I am working this and I'm working that stuff, then I have to work at it. I have to practice it. And at that point in my life, I lost everything that came between me and God. I lost that husband. I lost that house. I lost my pretty BMW. Texting. I totaled it texting because I couldn't miss that text. I was so important. And everything went away. And I ended up in a granny annex in someone's backyard, seeking God. And my life changed. I didn't understand when I got here because I would hear people talk about peace and I didn't understand how they got that, how that head shut off. It took me 10 years. I recommend you don't wait. 10 years of sitting in these rooms, wanting to scratch my face off. I'm sober, stark raving sober, My life today is really different. It's really good. I have peace. I actually got a message. Funny, we went to this women's event on Saturday, and I got a message today. And I had a woman who called me, and she left me a message today, and she said, you just seem so zen. And I was like, I don't think anyone's ever called me that in my life. Zen. I was like, really? A little hyper, a little weird. I moved here 3 years ago, and I was miserable for a year. And I feel like I was walking towards a drink again. And I couldn't find the fellowship I crave, and a couple people had given me this guy's number, the guy with the hat and the scarf. And he said, come, we need women. I went to the Tuesday night Kettering meeting, and there were like 8 of us at the time. Only other women was Trish and Anna. And I found the fellowship I craved. But I have to seek it. I have to get off my fat, lazy butt. My character defect of sloth is strong. I would much rather sit home than be sitting here in front of you guys with it. My sponsor requires me to wear a dress when I speak. Anybody who knows me knows I'm not dress girl. Last night I was sweats girl. It's my MO. But somewhere along the line, I became willing to do whatever you asked me to do to stay here. I don't know when that really happened, somewhere along that time period. But if you ask me, I will do it to stay here. I was listening to my friend Eric O share. I posted it for you guys. And he said, I love Cocaine Anonymous more than my mom. I love Cocaine Anonymous more than my job. I love Cocaine Anonymous more than my family. I love Cocaine Anonymous more than sex. Because without Cocaine Anonymous, I don't get to have any of those things. I love this thing. And if you're new or returning, it's here. It's all here on offer. And what's so funny is it doesn't even, I wish I could open up my brain and show you how wonderful it is. Because what it used to be like was, I just wanted to get through a day. I didn't understand what life was all about. Like, why do people even just do this? Why don't they just die? I have such an amazing life. I have the most amazing women in my life. I have the most amazing people. You know, I show up for my job today. My two bosses are brothers, an older brother and a younger brother, and their middle brother passed away a few weeks ago. And I think it was either a drug overdose or suicide because he went to a hotel room and never came back. And today I sat there at my computer and I got to pick up the Slack and send them love through, you know, an email. I'll just be there. And 16 years ago, that's not the girl who got here. The girl who got here was just, what can I get out of you? What can I get for me? And today it's not like that. My constant thought of others. My life depends on it, the book says. And that's not natural for me. My natural state is my constant thought of me. What can I do? What can I get? What's for me? And today I don't have to live that way anymore. And you guys gave it to me, and I'm really grateful, so thank you.